Good afternoon, and welcome to the third annual Global Men's Summit on Masculinity and Mental Health. I'm your host, Alicia Buss, and today we are starting off with the one and only Jake LaRue. Jake is the person who started it all with our first Global Men's Summit back in, 2020, November 2020. Where did the years go? Anyhow, so Jake is a former Marine. He helps veterans with horses, not just any kind of horses, but Mustangs in particular. He helps veterans struggling with PTSD and many other things. Jake is located in the United States in North Carolina and has an amazing podcast, Man with the Horse. And he is going to share with us perhaps some activities, some videos in relationship with horses, and share some of his own personal story in connection to masculinity and mental health. Jake, thanks so much for being on the summit today.
Thanks, Alicia. I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be back with you again with this. I've been with you on this journey, like you said, from the beginning, and it's been full of ups and downs and a great learning experience. And I've made some wonderful contacts and friends through this, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you.
A little bit about who I am and what's up with me. As Alicia mentioned, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served Persian Gulf era and a little bit after that, and some other little skirmishes that our country got into. And I want to apologize in advance. I am not on my game today, running a bit of a fever and getting sick. And my plan was to be live in the arena with my horses doing something interactive. So I'm gonna have to kind of wing it here and give you the best that I can from my desk with some video clips. Fortunately, the COVID experience that we had to improvise in equine assisted therapy and do some telehealth stuff. So I do have some recorded observations of horses that we might be able to look at as well. But
This will be great.
I did not grow up with horses. I wasn't one of those kids that had them in the backyard and grew up riding. I didn't know much about them. I've been on maybe a couple of trail rides in my life. And in 2013, I ended up in North Carolina by way of New Orleans Parish Prison, trying to get my life put back together after a series of mishaps, ups and downs. That's not part of what we're here to talk about today, except in hindsight. I was one of those veterans who just didn't have it right when I came out. I dealt with a lot of guilt and shame from my military experiences, a lot of things that I did not understand that were incongruent in myself. You know, I had a hard time balancing out the me that I used to be, the me that I thought I was, and the me that I knew that I had been. And it led to a lot of behavioral issues and a lot of bad relationships. And it ended up with a little bit of jail time. And what that told me is I needed to do something to get my head straight. So I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where the Charles George VA is. For those of you not in the States, the VA is a Veteran Administration medical center. And you might hear a lot of bad stuff about the American VA system, but Asheville is probably the best in the country and a great mental health facility. And I credit them with being instrumental in saving my life. So I got some help there, and I got into a mindfulness practice, started meditating and working on my own self-regulation, my own anger management issues and that sort of thing. And I went to a silent meditation retreat. And at the close of the retreat, I found out that one of the people that I'd been sitting with for a week was the owner of a therapeutic ranch, Horse Sense of the Carolinas, a lady named Shaman Knapp. And she was in the process of starting up a nonprofit program specifically to work with veterans who were dealing with, you know, trauma issues and with reintegrating, with coming home. And that was me. I was having a hard time coming home. A piece of me stayed in the desert and never really made it back. So again, I didn't know anything about horses, but I'm wide open. I want to find out what this is about. And I came out to her ranch and was allowed to observe a session with a group of veterans from substance abuse treatment group. And I was blown away. You hear that story people talk about when they meet their love of their life, or they have something happens and that switch just goes on. For me, it was literally spotlights. That piece of my life, that thing that I had been missing, popped on when I met horses. It just became, you know, the thing that I needed to do. I'd gotten back in school and was working toward a human services degree and wanted to be a social worker. And horses ended up being my avenue to give back. And that was almost 10 years ago. And I have done pretty much nothing but horses since then. Let's see, where am I at with that now? One of the biggest things that I learned as a man working with horses is that all this cowboy shit that you hear about and you see is not at all what it was about for me. For myself, horses are spiritual creatures, and I felt a connection to them on that level. And the kind of practice that we work with is, I hesitate to even call it natural horsemanship at this point in time. It's organic. I've gotten into most of the things that I'm doing with horses now are no ropes, no tools, no fences. We try to let things happen organically in the pasture with the horses, their choice in interacting with us or not interacting with us. A lot of it is energy work about where am I at? What kind of person am I? What are my intentions when I walk into this place with the horses? Because they're going to read it and know it and give me feedback on it. And that's going to tell me a lot about myself. I worked with one of the first horses I ever got the opportunity to get together with was my first teacher. His name was Honor. He passed away last month. He was 28 years old. I may get emotional talking about him. Quite okay with that. One of the things that I've gotten okay with as a man is being able to express my emotions openly in front of other people, both men and women, and there's no shame in it. Honor meant the world to me. He saved my life, literally, on more than one occasion when I don't think I would have decided to get up out of bed again. I went to see him. And he was a 17-year-old quarter horse when I met him that was retired from eventing, competitive horsemanship sport. He had bad feet and a grumpy disposition and very narrow parameters for what was considered acceptable human behavior. And I'm a fairly fired up Marine Corps veteran with the history that I've got, and I'm gonna make things happen with this horse. We're gonna be friends. And I came in with all my big energy, feet forward, shoulders squared, direct eye contact, full predator mode. And, and he just wasn't gonna have it. And we had a tenuous relationship for a long time. Looking back at it, I don't know how I managed to still be here, why he didn't kill me. He was incredibly forgiving of my heavy-handed behavior. And I remember working with him in a clinic one time, and I was asking him to do a pattern for me online. And he kept stopping in the middle of the pattern and changing and breaking his pace in the middle of the pattern. And I asked the instructor, what's the deal with this? What am I doing wrong? She says, you're carrying so much energy. You're asking him to do something. He's doing it, but then you're never releasing the energy. You're never releasing the request. So essentially you're walking behind him, banging on a trash can lid going, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. He's doing it, and if he's doing it, and you keep yelling at him to do it, he's getting mixed signals. He's confused. It's like, what do you mean? I'm relaxed. And she says, well, you don't look relaxed. The energy you're carrying is not relaxed. And I got thinking about that when I went home that night. And I went to my partner, now wife, and I looked at her and I said, look, I just want to know, am I relaxed? She says, well, I know you, so I know this is your relaxed. I was like, well, what does that mean? So, well, you're wound pretty tight all the time. You kind of make your presence known when you walk into a room. You carry a lot of energy around with you. It's kind of hard to deal with sometimes. Shocking to me. I thought I was a fairly outgoing, friendly person. And I asked other people that I knew for a while and got similar responses. And I got to playing with this horse more and working on just exhaling and bringing some of those mindfulness meditation skills into play with the horse, and set my intention first, bring myself back to my breath, relax, let the tension in my shoulders and jaws drop, and see what happened. And the reaction was magic. The change in his behavior, the change in his connection to me, and the change in his response to my request was amazing. It was he went from being a reluctant participant to being a willing partner. And I looked at that situation, and small thing as it may be, it changed my worldview on just about every situation that I'd gotten myself into throughout the course of my life. The jobs that I'd lost, the breakups that I'd had, the fights between old friends, the arguments with my family, and the kind of energy that I brought into every one of those situations, and the aggression that I carried with me into every one of those conversations turned it into a conflict. And it took this big white horse to show me that that's what I was looking like to the rest of the world. And I became, it was crushing at first. I gotta tell you, that was when I had to sit with and had some tears over. I did not want to see myself that way. It was a hard realization. I didn't want to be the angry guy. So I started working really hard on not being anymore. And finding out how to do that for myself, I've learned how to share that with other people, which is what I do here and now. And I'm grateful to be able to be here doing now. So, any questions or any feedback on anything I've said so far? You guys hear me all right? I'm losing my voice.
Yeah, no, you sound just fine, Jake. I appreciate you sharing your story. And I think we've known each other for maybe 6 years now. It's been a while since I was in North Carolina, and it's been beautiful to watch your just transformation in the last 6 years and the work that you've been doing with the horses and now the Mustangs, and striking out on your own, and just that increased confidence that you've had. That's a grounded confidence, and just that continuing to be more introspective and the mature, like healthy masculinity and leadership and vulnerability. It's been really beautiful to just watch that unfold over the course of time.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been an interesting evolution. It's funny. I look at where my practice is now, and it's come full back around to very mindfulness based with the horses. I came into the horses through a mindfulness practice, and then it got very clinical for a long time. I got heavy into, as I was going through school, I got heavy into research, equine assisted psychotherapy, equine facilitated learning, anything to do with horses and psychotherapy and trauma and healing has for a long time been looked at as kind of like, as our friend Warwick Schiller calls it, kind of a woo-woo, non-scientific, right up there with crystal energy and stuff that is not approved of in scientific circles. And we've gone through great lengths in the last 10 years to validate what we do. And we have a lot of really hard neuroscience data now that backs up what we're about. There's even been a study done through Columbia University called the Man of War Project, which has gone as far as to take MRI readings of the participants' brains as they go through the program and show actual physical transformations in the human brain after going through equine-assisted psychotherapeutic programs. It's real solid healing with a solid psychotherapeutic theory behind it and neuroscience backing and evidence. And I was thrilled to be part of that, but I also kind of got lost and nerded out in that. And it became more about, look what we're doing, and less about what we were being and who we were in the arena. And I heard somebody say something that really clicked it back into place for me. When you go in with the horses, the client doesn't know, or the horse doesn't know who the client is. So I had to remind myself once again, bring it all back to the breathing, bring it all back, slow it down, and step back in with the horses. And COVID provided the opportunity for a lot of changes. The facility that I was at couldn't maintain the pace and the funding that it had. We downsized. I met a woman who was going through a degree for her doctorate in psychology, who had a small farm with 4 horses and needed somebody to take care of them. I needed a place to move my horse. And boom, we got together, and now we have Shaman Hill Center, which is, we've been together for 18 months there now. And that is where my private practice and Man with a Horse Project, a new nonprofit, is oriented out of. And what we are focused on is continuing this kind of healing with people and horses in a much more mindfulness and spirituality based practice, less clinical, but also bringing, as you see in my background photo here, connecting wild Mustangs with the veteran population and with the at-risk population on the East Coast. So they get to have the experience of meeting and engaging with wild Mustangs, which is something that is, we don't get a lot of them over here on the East Coast. They're mostly on the West Coast of the United States. And there's a whole lot involved in that project that I could probably take up 2 or 3 hours of your time all by myself picking that, but it's a wonderful experience. When I talk about my spiritual connection to horses, I want to back up a little bit and explain some of that, and that'll bring us into one of the videos that I want to show you as well.
And people, please feel free to jump in too if you have questions for Jake. Don't be afraid.
Ding, 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 wave a hand, interrupt me. I know Zoom meetings are hard that way.
I'm just listening at the moment, that's all.
Right on, right on.
And that's also totally fine. Just happy to have you here.
So when I say that I feel that horses are spiritual creatures, I look at even back through mythology and stories behind horses. I'm very plugged into European, Celtic, and Norse mythology. And Odin had an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, which translates into the sliding one. And he was the only creature in that realm that could slide back and forth between Helheim and Midgard, to go back and forth between the spirit realm and the human realm. So I look at that even in history and in our mythology, horses being spiritual creatures that exist both in the spirit and in the physical at the same time. And I even think in terms of how their eyes work. They've got the largest eyeball of any land-based mammal, believe it or not. Huge, huge eyeballs. Their vision is amazing. They have just a very limited patch directly in front of their face where they can't see, very limited patch right behind their back where they can't see. And they see out of both sides of their head different pictures at the same time and put that together into one image in their head. So when they look at us, I believe that they see both the spirit and the human, the flesh, together at the same time. And then I look at my veteran brothers and sisters coming back from our conflicts overseas, and I look at trauma. And trauma is not just a diagnosis or an experience. It's a spiritual injury, and it's a fracture. It's when you get hit so hard that that essence inside you is no longer safe in the body, and it's in pieces around you. And when the horse looks at you, it sees all of you together. It sees both the spirit and the body, and it integrates both into one in its mind. So I know I'm on the woo-woo side of things again, the non-clinical, but that's my personal attachment to horses. And I don't really feel any need to justify that clinically anymore. I like the way that that feels, and I choose to believe that. And my experience with them tells me that. And going past that, I think that all of nature communicates on a silent energy, spiritual energy level, whatever you want to call it. Humans do too, but we've lost the aptitude for it. We've sacrificed it for linguistics, and we've got the short end of the stick by doing it because we rely on our words, which are so easily deceptive. And we rely on our eyes, which are the easiest of our senses to be fooled, more than we rely on any of our other senses for communication. And we've almost completely lost the ability to communicate through our body energy and through our focus. Think about it. It's still there. If two people are in an argument, even if they stop, you walk into the room. Can you feel it? It's charged.
Definitely.
Now there's actually scientific basis for this. HeartMath Institute has done studies with a piece of equipment called an M-wave monitor that measures coherence. Just like the brain with an EKG can measure the electromagnetic pulses that the brain puts out, the heart also puts out electromagnetic pulses at a rate at about 10 times the level the brain does. It can be measured away from the body. The horse's heart, so much larger than the human's, puts out those electromagnetic pulses as well, about 10 times further than the human's does. So when we talk about them sensing us as we're coming, we're not kidding. They are. And what I'm doing now, a lot of the work that I'm doing now with horses and specific with the wild Mustangs, when domestic horses are perceptive, we're talking next level when it comes to the wild Mustangs. I think of domestic horses in terms of communicating with spirit, lowercase horse. With wild Mustangs, it's capital H all the way across horse. That's a lot of energy. And it's an animal that has not grown up around humans, does not have the attachment to us that domestic animals do, doesn't use the same means of communication that domestic animals do. So the energy play comes in so much more then. And a lot of what I'll ask people to do and what I do myself is I might ask them first when we get there, most of it's out in the pasture with the horse, to just observe and just settle the breath in and observe. And I'll see if I can I share here on the screen?
You should be able to. Here, let me make you a co-host and it should be
I got a share
good.
screen. Cool. Should be able to.
I'm making you a co-host. There you go, bud.
Okay. So this is what it might look like for somebody first walking out in the pasture with us. I think this is it. Oh, why are you doing this to me?
I ask that of technology a lot. Are those your boys, Jake, your two Mustangs that are coming?
Those are the boys in the background. That is Caesar and LaRue. I'm trying to figure
Spelled differently than his last name.
Yes.
Just for anybody who's wondering.
Long story short, I started following LaRue while he was still out in the wild. And I was recovering from a motorcycle accident. So I was laid up and had pretty much tried to twist my left leg off at the knee. And spent the better part of a year in bed with my leg elevated and, going out to see my horses when I could, but following horses in the Sandwash Basin wild herd out in Colorado. LaRue is the light gray, and he was wild at the time. And with the last name, my name LaRue, and his name LaRue, spelled Laroux. I just started following him. And then I heard that he got rounded up in one of the Bureau of Land Management captures and was going to be put up for auction. And wild horses in the West, they get rounded up and they get put up for auction, and they end up in some pretty unspeakable places. They go to slaughterhouses and they get sold overseas, and they go and end up in dog food and glue factories and all kinds of stuff. And of course, I wasn't going to let that happen. So I started a process of applying for, I got the application approved to adopt him. And while the online auction, 7-day auction was going on, I had another advocacy group reach out and offer to sponsor me and support me in this ongoing effort if I would adopt his brother as well, which is Caesar, which is the other one. They have the same sire. They're 3 months apart. They ran together as bachelor stallions. They shared a band of mares together. They were rounded up together, and they stayed together in the holding pens. So now they get to stay together for good. So
it's awesome.
I'm not figuring out how this is working. I'm going to try it one more time, but I'm getting a permissions problem from my computer. So
from your computer.
Yeah.
Tyler, any suggestions?
No, if it's a permissions thing, either accepting the permissions and going through, but that can be sticky because it depends on the computer and the software and how recently it was updated.
It's a new Mac. I retired my 12-year-old one because they stopped allowing me to upgrade the software. So
that's what happened to me. That's why this is a new computer that makes me look fantastic on Zoom.
Planned obsolescence. It has its advantages.
Exactly. Although it does sometimes have the internet issue. So Jake, you have
and getting open system preferences, and I don't know where that went.
Yeah, gosh, now that I'm not single anymore, I don't have to be asked my preferences anymore. It's so nice. We like to make jokes, bring a little levity to situations. Otherwise, Jake, if you have any YouTube channels that you recommend that you would like me to pull up to try and share, we can attempt to do that.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's not on a YouTube channel, but I will talk you through it. Yes.
All right. Well, just imagine the horses that you have on the screen on the back.
Yep, I'll get out of the way. So what I have a video, and it's just a camera sitting out in pasture with a group of horses, and they're just wandering around being themselves and grazing. And initially, when we meet the person down at the barn, whatever, we decide where we're going to be out in the field. Where I'm at now is Shaman Hill, is a 30-acre field. We do have an arena, which we use sometimes, but everything we do, we try to do out in pasture. It said no ropes, no fences, horses have choice. We'll go find them where they're at and start with the breath. I'm going to ask that we just find our center, and begin breathing from the belly. Slow inhale and exhale at your own pace. And in the pasture, you'll hear whatever sounds depending on the time of year. It might be snow melting and dripping off the tree branches. In the spring, it might be the birds chirping, wind blowing through the leaves. You'd hear the snort and scratching of the horses, the chewing sounds that they're making as they move around and graze. And then maybe noticing what you smell out in the field as well. Finding 3 things in particular that you smell. Can you smell the hay in the wind? Is the breeze blowing off the river up toward the pastures today? What can you notice? And then we may open our eyes and start paying attention to what the horses are doing and go into an observation with the horses. And in watching the horses interact with each other, there's a lot to be learned there about what we're carrying inside ourselves. I may know my horses very well, so I know that these 2 horses just happen to be moving in the same direction. But the person who's with me may look at the horses and go, that one's pushing this horse, or this horse is leading that horse. So I might lead on with a little observation and ask, what are you seeing? And then why? And move forward a little more than that to try to get a feel at the beginning, early on, where you're at and what our focus is on. And then I want to get out of it because it's really not about what I'm doing. And ask the individual to engage with the horses in whatever way is comfortable, whatever way is appropriate. It doesn't have to be what they saw Robert Redford do in The Horse Whisperer, or John Wayne did this in this movie, or whatever, and whatever way is comfortable. I also really like percussion instruments. I do a lot of drumming with horses. So I'll bring an assortment of percussion instruments, hoop drums, clickers, rattles, djembe, whatever. I'm always keeping an eye out. I drive by a pawn shop and oh, hey, there's one in the window. I'm going to go look at it, see if it sounds good, pick it up and add it to the repertoire. A friend of mine heard about what I was doing and sent me this beautiful one. I don't know if it'll show up too well, but which is almost too pretty to play, but I'm going to add that in as well. But I like to hand a drum to an instrument to somebody if they care to, or I can provide a rhythm for them. But find your rhythm. What's your beat? What's your internal rhythm? What does that feel like? For some people, it might be, there's that, that biorhythm 120 to 140, the trance rhythms, the shaman trance rhythms. Somebody might go for that. Or it might be a slow, steady. Watch people decide to walk with the horse and just drum with the horse's footsteps. But to find their rhythm, to find their vibration, and then go match their vibration with the horses. And the fun thing about that is you can never predict what's going to happen with horses. They are going to make up their own mind who to connect with, how to connect, who to commune with, and how deeply. whether or not they're going to engage at all that day. And some of them really do have their preferences for when it comes to rhythm, for the timbre of the drum, for the speed. They've got their rhythms too, and they'll match with you and find you. And I've watched horses come from one end of the field to the other to come see who's there and who's playing and to participate and join the circle. And we just let it happen very organically. For myself and for what I found with a lot of other veterans that are struggling with their own mental health, is that talk therapy really isn't easy. It's not easy for anybody, but sitting down with a therapist who might be, I mean, I'm 52 years old, sitting down with a therapist who is half my age, without my life experience, probably not a veteran, probably never seen anything like I've seen. I'm not going to be able to connect and relate. And I know my stories, and I've probably shared them with enough people that I can tell you about them dispassionately, which is why I just don't anymore. Not about the war stories. There's no point. There's no point in the retelling. It's about the healing. And I found that with the horses for myself, I didn't have to talk. I could find the healing internally without having to put it into the language. And I found by doing that, I could put it into language, that, you know, I could find a way to express it and put it into words so that I could tell other people what I get out of it and be able to introduce the opportunity for them to experience it for themselves. One of the other things that I found with horses, and this is very specific to men, is that, and I've seen this too with a lot of our, with a lot of men that I've met through the men's coaching programs. I'm all about male empowerment, but there's sometimes too much of a focus on masculine energy. A lot of what we've gotten wrong has been about emphasizing too much masculine energy. The balanced man, the balanced woman, the balanced individual is a harmonizing of the masculine and feminine energy. It is the emperor and the empress, the king and the queen. You know, the lovers, the pair entwined. It is not one or the other. And horses are bottom of the food chain prey animals that have no earthly reason to want to be with you. And to engage in a relationship with a horse and to cultivate a relationship with a horse, I need to touch base with empathy. I need to touch base with nurturing. I need to touch base with compassion. I need to show this animal, this prey animal who can kill me faster than I can blink, trying to get away from me, that it can not only trust my judgment better than its own instinct, not only is it safe with me, but also that I'm looking out for its safety. So I have to touch base with the masculine and feminine energies in myself and integrate them entirely to be a kind of person who the horse is going to trust as a herd mate and a leader.
I always find that the idea of masculine energy is very loaded. I'm an ex-veteran as well, and I was a veteran child as well.
Mm.
And I find a lot of people who define masculinity as a toxic thing, and I think they got it wrong, because a masculinity can be a very sensitive form of strength.
Mm-hmm.
Just like my mother should never have had children, but she was definitely a strong female. But under femininity, it was expected that she should be a mother and a carer, and that was so wrong. You mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some women are not meant to be mothers. I strongly believe that.
And I know some fathers that are fantastic stay-at-home dads too now, and I'm glad to see that becoming more widely accepted.
And the strange thing with the military, I can only spoke about British military, is people have a perception of the way military people are, but it's a big organization, and the way I interact with people isn't what other people would expect of a military person, because we're a massive group of misfits of different people of different cultures.
Yes, sir. It is. We've said that when we talked about some of the racial issues that we've had in the States, that when it comes to the military, it's everybody's green. And it was the great melting pot. It was, I don't know. I've heard a lot of stuff about it now, but the unit that I was in, we were all green. It was just, we were all the same. It was just from all different walks of life, all different dispositions, all different backgrounds and heritages, and you know, there was no stereotype at all. It's just like, yeah, you all wear the uniform.
Yeah,
You're all brothers.
The job, wasn't it? It was whether or not you could do the job. In the British military, we all came from people came from all over the Commonwealth. So that's Caribbean all the way to Australia, New Zealand. You had people who were like, you know, were from Zimbabwe, but who were classed themselves as Rhodesians, so they ended up in the British Army. It just, as the same, it's just a melting pot again. You mean?
Yeah. It's fun stuff. I do miss that part of it. I do miss that part of the camaraderie. I'm very involved with the Veteran of Foreign Wars post in my area here, and it's the same thing there. You know, it's within the four walls of that clubhouse. It's an entirely different world.
But it's the communication that's different. And then I find I don't bother talking to therapy anymore, because I always feel like I'm going to use the word feminine because I can't think of a better word, but I almost think like a form of feminine therapy is imposed on us. And that's a great thing with horses or animals. It's not so much about talking. I speak from my own. It's actually a masculine energy is more kind of given out rather than talked about. So it's about doing something together, or picking up on the energy from an animal or a horse or whatever, and reciprocating it rather than constantly talking about your problem. Well, that's my opinion anyway. It's an opinion, maybe it's dodgy, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sure if I'm clear, but I want to try to make sure I'm clear, because I think I'm following what you're saying about the feminizing a bit in therapy. The feedback that I've gotten from a lot of the veterans that I've worked with, and how I felt myself as well, is when I initially sat down with a therapist who's a 24-year-old who had just completed her master's degree, and her first official job was at the VA as a licensed clinical social worker. And she started talking to me about, well, how does that make you feel? And where do you feel that inside your body? And what color is that feeling? And I had to just kind of like, what the hell? I wasn't in touch enough or inside my own body enough to be able to answer any of these questions. I was like, if I got to answer this kind of shit to be able to get better, I'm gonna stay out here sick. You know, this isn't going to help me. And I find that to be true with so many of us, is that with so many men that I've worked with, is we're not in touch with ourselves inside our bodies in that way to be able to have those kind of conversations, or to identify those thought feelings that way.
Yeah.
And so being asked to talk about it does feel like we're being feminized.
Yeah. And I worried about using the word feminine, because I don't.
This is a safe space for us to do that, though.
Yeah. Well, there's a speaker you've got coming on, Ivan. Is it today or tomorrow?
Ivan Broad tomorrow at 10.
Well,
he's a friend of yours, right?
Well, he's a person who drew me into a breath therapy course last year. I saw him on LinkedIn. And I had a need. It was that energy. I spotted the energy online, and then it drew me to him. And the woman who ran the course, Natalie, was. It was all about breathing, and she was the first time she said, "Well, actually, you can be angry, and you can say fuck." And that, if I'd done that in a normal therapy room. And at the time, I'd been bullied by a female on another course where I was feeling vulnerable. And I was using the word toxic Marxist, a feminist Marxist, and I didn't even aware that I had a problem. Firstly, I had a problem because of my own background with my mother, but then also had the problem because she was a feminist Marxist. She was blaming men for her problems and then imposing her problems. So when I was standing up in my male way, then I was being undermined. And it wasn't until I did the breath work that gave me the voice to understand that, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm getting off a tangent there. I apologize for that.
No need to apologize. That's what we're here for. This is exactly what we're here for, to be able to just have honest, vulnerable conversations about things, and it goes wherever it's meant to go.
I do go off on a tangent because I have Gulf War illness, and part of that is confusion and all over the place with it. And that's another reason why I'm involved so much in therapy, because I don't find drugs work. They're garbage. Well, some drugs are okay for some time, but mostly it's about a lifestyle and rethinking and acting in a different way. I've now got to a stage where I can't work anymore, but understanding that I can define my work in other forms. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you still finding you have a space of purpose, if you don't mind me asking?
I had a purpose. I've got a purpose with a veterans group. They got a couple of horses, but I kind of stayed away from it because I was asked to do too much, and I with my illness I was getting tired, but also the fact that they're not letting them roam free. So they're saying one thing and doing something different. And I know if it wasn't for my memory, I could do a better job, which is frustrating. My memory doesn't let me, my disability doesn't let me do things. So it's accepting what you can do and accepting what you can't do sometimes is the problem.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We are going to be having a great speaker here at 5 o'clock as well, who has cerebral palsy and is going to be talking about masculinity in association with disabilities and just honoring each one of us and our differences, and, you know, just kindness and really just getting to be your authentic self without judgment.
Very nice. Very cool.
And invisible illnesses can be hard for people, or injuries. And I think
it's so difficult. My mate got blown up in Northern Ireland years ago, and in his hands. But it's a plus and a minus, because with his disability, you can see his disability, so you can see his wounds. And the problem with that is then people keep asking him his story, and he has to tell the story time and time again. But then I have my wounds, which I can choose not to share, but then it means people can't see your wounds. So they both have positive and negatives in them, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I find difficult so much with for a lot of the people with the invisible wounds is the misunderstanding that they get and the stigma that gets attached to it from people that can't see what causes the behavior that they might be drawing attention to them in a public place, or that might be putting them in a trigger in a crisis. I know for myself, before I got discharged in 1996, and I did not get officially diagnosed I was officially diagnosed with chronic PTSD in 2009, and that was the first time I ever bothered to even go get any kind of help. I had to run around with a misdiagnosis when it came to medication, and some really, really, really bad results with that. But a lot of the behavior that I saw in hindsight in my early relationships and my early friendships out of the military were symptomatic of what I was experiencing from my trauma injuries. You know, it was, had I known what, you know, if I knew then what I know now, had any of us known as much then as we do now about post-traumatic stress injuries and that sort of, I hate post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not a disorder. You got, speak about cussing, you got fucked up. That's what happened. We got fucked up. If we didn't have something's not wrong with us, something happened to us. So it's an injury. I like PTSI much better than PTSD.
Isn't,
So
I don't know about you on your in the US, but also like the area I live is a tough area, and people have been run up and down mountains and everything. It's just the way we live around here. But a lot of us were angry before we joined the military, and the military wanted angry people. And I think a lot of people have got complex PTSD from childhood. But we can't say that to the military because they'll take pensions off us and treatment.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I've heard that from many of the veterans that I've worked with as well, that exact same thing. And I can say this about myself as well, that, I was carrying a lot around before I enlisted. And I also can firmly state from firsthand experience that you're not quite right in the damn head if you decide to enlist in the Marine Corps. Just making that decision in and of itself means there's, you're going to go get into some shit if you join the Marine Corps. You just kind of, and you want to. I mean, there's people that join the Marine Corps, there's something in us that we want to go get in a fight. It's just what it is. We'd pick another branch of the service if we didn't want to assure that we were going to go get in a fight. And be careful what you ask for. So I think there's a little bit wrong with all of us that enlist in that particular branch just to start with. But I've heard from a number of other veterans that I've worked with too. One guy put it best. He says, man, I was carrying around a bag full of rocks before I ever enlisted. Then I went to Afghanistan and got shot, and it was dropped. That was the rock that blew the bottom out of the bag. I've counseled guys that had just bad family trauma before they ever enlisted, came out of, abusive families. I had counseled a young man who, after he got out of the Marine Corps, his father was a drug addict. They got in a fight in the front yard, and his dad had a heart attack and died while they were fighting. And what he was dealing with was such a little thing, military related, compared to what he had to deal with before and after.
But that's what they want. They want.
The Marine Corps didn't teach him the coping skills to deal with that. You got a hammer, that's your tool. That doesn't work, here's a bigger hammer. If that doesn't work, get 4 more guys with hammers. Yeah. As my horses say.
And see, we do it instinctively as well. But we think that we don't, but I mean, that's how you know the difference between to deal in a fight. The difference to that person you're going to fight and you're going to win before you even, as soon as you look at them, because you're picking up on their body language and the energy that they're actually giving out. You mean? And there's some people you look at and I'm going, no way am I going near that person. I'm not near that person, because you're going to lose before you even eat, as soon as you've looked at them.
I've decided I'm not mean enough to get in a fight with anybody anymore.
I'm not. I've never have been. The trouble is, I joined the military and I wasn't mean in the first place. Well, I was a thoughtful person, but I was brought up by warriors. I was brought up with a father who was what would you call it? A master sergeant. My father was an RSM. So that's a man who thinks he can walk on water and usually can't.
Okay. It would have been a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. Yeah.
So if you're brought up in that environment, then you're going to be a bit fucked before you even start, aren't you?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I've spent a long time trying to remember who I was before I enlisted. Trying to remember who I was before the Marine Corps told me who I was supposed to be, and to come back to that, and came to the realization after a lot of deep internal work on myself that I was a very sensitive and loving young man, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps for a lot of the right reasons, and was asked to do a lot of the wrong things. I was a true believer, a 100% red, white, and blue patriot, and I believed it all. When I was a kid, I believed 100% what America did and what we stood for, and eyes wide closed. And I say I lost my faith in the sand overseas, and it was pretty devastating. And I lost a lot of time trying to remember who I was before I became that person. And figuring it out now.
Yeah, I lost my faith for about 15, 20 years. I mean, I left because I knew it wasn't what I should do. but then I was called up to the first Gulf War, or Desert Storm, as you call it. And then I got ill because of all the injections and medication they gave me. So that made me angry again. And I believed that everybody in the military was a bastard and horrible and evil. And then I came to realize a few years ago, it's not a organization isn't a human being. It's a collective of people, and some are good and some are horrible. And when I started to realize that, but also I found that when I was ill, it was only military veterans who would help me. I worked in the National Health Service. They didn't help me. Nobody else helped me apart from military veterans. So I couldn't go with that story anymore. I couldn't go with that narrative that everybody in the military was horrible and they'd all caused it, because they hadn't. There was plenty of good people in there as well as bad people.
I found with the veteran population, we tend to look out for our own, and the attitude is, if we don't, no one else will. In the United States, post-Vietnam War, the Vietnam veterans were not given a very welcome home. They were spit on and beaten and treated like shit, and they got nothing for their pain and suffering until recently. And they have been the biggest advocate for other veterans in the United States, making sure that other veterans from subsequent conflicts that have come home.
I remember being addressed by the first Rambo movie, isn't it? The first one. The very first one.
Yep.
Kind of addressed that problem. That you had these people coming back and serve their country and were like living on the land, weren't they? Because nobody wanted them, did they?
Nope. There's a huge disconnect, I think, in our society right now too, because we've had an entire generation at war, but a nation that's been at the mall and on their cell phones and on YouTube and TikTok and everywhere else but at war. Wow, we've had a whole generation at war. I mean, I remember immediately post 9/11, the entire country was very aware of everything that was going on, with our troops, everywhere they were going. But for the last 18 years, until this recent withdrawal from Afghanistan, most people couldn't tell you the name of any of the bases that our troops were in unless they had loved ones there. Couldn't tell you what cities they were fighting on unless they just happened to hear it on the news that morning. Couldn't tell you what reason they were fighting in any one specific conflict or another in any part of any of these countries. Americans pretty much did not acknowledge in our home lives that America was at war for 20 years. It didn't affect the home front at all. There were no sacrifices made here.
War has never ended.
It hasn't.
It never has. I mean, in the 80s, I was sitting around in Germany waiting for the Russians to come over because I was next to Belsen concentration camp. And there was a war. It's just that we didn't fire a shot. It was still a war.
I was pretty sure we were going to die. We were going to all get nuked and die in the 80s before I was ever out of high school. I was positive. I was just going to not wake up one day, boom, mushroom cloud, or I was going to have some zombie apocalypse, radiation zombies crawling out of the ocean up onto the Fort Lauderdale beach. We were sure it was all over back then. It's
that when the zombie planning happened, that's when it all first started, was the 80s. Like everybody's like, apocalypse now. And we're like, the next 40 years, they're just like, man, the containers we have available.
George Romero made a killing making movies about that stuff. So.
Exactly. So as we transition, we have our last few moments. Jake, I want to make sure that you have time to share where people can find you for the support that they need, and any brief questions we have before we transition over to Tyler and his talk.
Oh, right on. Okay. Yes, right now I have web pages under construction, so it is not available to find me yet. Easiest way to find me, unfortunately, is still on Facebook. The page is called Man with a Horse. And check on me. I am not podcasting or blogging as regularly as I should be, and shame on me.
No, there's no shame here. Sorry, you take that back right now, sir. Don't you dare.
but there are past stuff up, and there will be more coming shortly. And I look forward to staying in touch with you guys. Thank you.
What's the chances of coming over and seeing you then?
Oh man, I'd love to have you. I actually, every August, I go to a Mustang sanctuary in Colorado called the Middle Way, and I facilitate a 5-day veterans retreat there. And we're also trying to set up to do one here once I get everything sorted out. Like I said, I'm just starting out at Shaman Hill. Once I have the facility set up, I'd like to do one here as well. Yeah. Yeah, if you end up in Western North Carolina, I'm in Alexander, North Carolina. That's where the farm is, right next to Asheville, which is a nice place to visit. Western North Carolina. Stay in touch with me, and I'd be happy to host you.
Yeah, I need another adventure. Veterans always need an adventure.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It's what brought me out to Colorado to play with wild Mustangs to start with. I needed another adventure. Lord knows me, my adventures on motorcycles are not working out well for me. I'll stick to
Dear Lord, Jake.
Yeah, I'll stick to the flesh and blood horses instead of the iron ones.
I've never seen a thing about the iron horses, but I always like being with the natural horses, you know.
I've had 2 accidents in 18 months, or 2 accidents, and it's been 20 months now, and spent the better part of that period of time not being able to walk. So I'm not gonna. I think I'm giving them up.
Aww. So Jake, thank you so much again, my dear friend, for being here.
Nice talking to you guys. Tyler, I'm going to stick around and listen to you talk too.
Sounds great. I'm glad, because I have 2 quick questions for you. Do you know?
Oh, Tyler. It happened again.
Hold on. We're going to do this.
Technology in its joyful moments.
So what it was is I just leaned on my keyboard just to be super cool. Jake, do you know Sean Douglas? He's an ex-Marine based out of North Carolina as well, or was. I think he might have just recently moved.
I know the name. I know the name.
I'm gonna put you in. Yeah, I'll put you in touch with him. He's right fantastic and loves supporting vets. Great, phenomenal speaker. And the other name I was going to ask you, do you the group that sponsored your horse adoption, it wasn't run by Wendy Harris by any chance, was it?
No.
Okay, I'm going to put you in touch with her too, because she does great work with horses. Is based out of, she splits her time between Colorado and Washington.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll be out in Colorado in February to officially meet my boys. They're staying they're going to stay out at the Middle Way until I go out in August to do the retreat, and then bring them back here, hopefully, see where they're at in their process then.
Well, and I grew up on a ranch over 240 acres up here in Alberta, and we have a pack of feral horses that they run the valley, and that's what they do. They've been there for as long as my family has been on the ranch, and that is going on 130 years now.
That's
140. 1884 was when my great grandfather would have settled the land. So we're coming up, that's 140 years in 2 years of that ranch. So, and those horses have been there the whole time. He always let them run free. And in fact, my uncle deeded the land about 4 or 5 years ago to the government as a preserve, with the understanding that they would turn the land over back to the government, but the provision was they had to allow the horses to continue to run wild, and if anything prevented that, the land reverted back to us. So
nice. We have a very similar thing on Shaman Hill Center. Is the property that my horses are on is in a land trust, and it's steep slope. It's not really what you would normally think of as horse country, but we're in the North Carolina mountains. Steep slope, heavy wooded, and a lot of the places on it, and all of the trees are forestry registered now, so they can't be cut. And the land's in a land trust, a perpetual land trust, with a local conservatory. So it's like,
well, that's great to hear. I love the Appalachians; they're beautiful, and my Rockies are a little bit bigger, but no less beautiful.
We're a little older. Yours are a little bigger.
That's right. That's right. But no, and it was funny because when you were talking about the rhythms of the horses and the internal rhythms that we have ourselves. I remember when I was about 14 or 15, we used to camp down on the river valley, and it's an older established waterway, and so the valley is really quite deep, and it's a steep hike in. You can't actually have to top. You park at the top, and then we hike down, and then we would tent, and we'd be in the valley, and that's where the horses would run. It's their natural causeway, essentially. And I remember taking my girlfriend out one weekend, and beautiful stars to watch out there, like we have. And in the summer, you get not only the full constellations completely unobstructed by lights, you see millions and millions of stars, but because I'm far enough up in the northern hemisphere, we get to see the northern lights too, without having to freeze ourselves in Arctic air. So you have these really beautiful summer nights, and you can come and you see the northern lights dance. And me and my girlfriend were sitting out and watching this, and I could you'd start to hear this little bit of rustling, and then you could hear the sigh and the neigh, and she'd say, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's the horses." And something must have spooked them. And we had 40 head decide that they were going to move from point A to point B in a hurry, and they ran. And just the sound that makes, having that many and that heavy of an animal move in rhythm with each other, instinctually knowing where they needed to go. It was pitch black, and nobody got hurt. Nobody was interrupted. They knew where they needed to be and go. And just the sound of it, you could feel it through the ground. And I remember thinking, I should be scared, but this is the most beautiful, exhilarating thing. And me and her just kind of sat there holding each other just in case. And when it was done, we had done a lot of extracurricular activities that night, and that was the most thrilling thing that we had done.
Nice.
So I'll never forget that, just the feeling of it. And it's funny that you're both of you are veterans. One of the I'm a drummer. I love percussion. So when you were talking about that, I'm like, oh yeah, no pawn shops. That's the best place for musical instruments. And I'm fully aware of getting them. And I was at a drumming camp probably 10 years ago now, and there was a veteran that was there, and he was talking about how he had a hard time falling asleep for a long while, just from experiences. And he said the reason he got into drumming was that it actually helped him with his sleep and coming in touch with his rhythm. And so what he would do is he would tap out on his thighs whatever beat he was going for, say 120, 140 beats per minute. And he would just concentrate on the beat, boom, 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 and he would keep it going for 2 or 3 minutes. And then he would intentionally and purposefully start to slow it down. And he'd bring it down to 60 beats per minute and hold it, and bring it down to about 40 beats per minute and hold it, and then bring it to like 20 beats per minute. And as he was calming the rhythm, because it was the only thing he could concentrate on, his breathing slowed, his mind slowed, and next thing you knew, he was asleep. And I was like, that is the most genius thing, because I'm a man with a busy mind. I have a lot going on inside this head, and I often find it very difficult to sleep as well. So I started doing that, and I'm like, this is genius. Just out. And I remember knowing that is a secret, because one of the things that I used to do, it drove my mother crazy. I grew up as an actor. I started in theater when I was 6 years old. And so I'd be exposed to a lot of like sound technicians and sound rooms and stuff like that. And I remember during a rehearsal one night, the sound tech was just blaring EDM in the sound booth. you couldn't hear it out in the stage. And I'd gone in because I loved the stuff and it was kind of cool. And I remember curling up in the corner, and the next thing I knew, I woke up and I'd fallen asleep for like a half an hour. And I'm like, how can you sleep with this rhythm going? But because it's so steady, like it just knocks you out. And for honestly, 3 or 4 years after that, that was how I'd sleep, was blaring EDM and like death metal. Just anything with a steady like, and it would just, it would knock me out. And so I think there's more to that, obviously, and there's definitely a science there. And I love that you had mentioned heart math, because I'm a huge heart math fan. It's and again, this will sound crazy, but I think there is going to be a point where science and religion, which for some reason are opposed, will come together. And I honestly think in my heart that heart math is the key to that there is going to be a proof that comes where the two align, and science goes, oh, that's what you were talking about. And religion goes, oh, that's what you were talking about. We were saying the same thing.
Thank you. I am so in agreement with that. I think about that quite a bit when I initially started using terms like spirituality and spiritual connection to horses. I was working at a psychotherapy facility, and they're kind of like, "Oh, shoo, can't do that. We're clinical here, and this is why we do it this way." And I'm like, so you're telling me that while we do this, it changes these? I'm using a M-wave on the ear with the little coherence things from heart math to real-time regulate watch clients' coherence levels in the arena. This was part of my college study thing. So while they're regulating, while this is happening and we're watching the coherence levels change, why can't that be a spiritual connection? Oh, because it's this scientific thing. I'm like, but yes, and not either or. Why can't this be a spiritual experience that is being shown to happen in the body through this neurofeedback? Why can't it be the same thing?
And I don't understand how they got it, because I mean, when you talk about Jung, come on, that's spiritual, for God's sake. And if you take it all the way back to Galileo, he was an artist, he was a philosopher, he was a scientist. Where do we suddenly lose this concept that everything just has to be measurable as far as we can see it? Just because we haven't got the tools to measure it yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
As I said, there's one of my favorite phrases when I started doing research is there's 3 great lies. There's lies, damn lies, and there's statistics.
Stats, and lies. Yeah. No,
I had a counselor in the schools. I got trained as a counselor, and we had to do how many people we saw, but we only were allowed 12 sessions. Or actually, was it 12 or 14 sessions? So after the 14 sessions, we couldn't see. We weren't meant to see them. But what we did is we recorded them as a new client. So all the stats said we'd seen like 200, 300 people. No, we'd seen the same people. We'd just give them a break for 3 weeks. But that was the scientific stats. So if we're doing it on that, what else is going on in the scientific stats? I mean, it's just exactly. And also there was a presumption, because we'd seen them, that we'd actually help them. All the statistics said was we'd seen them. That's all it meant. And I'd had people that I'd seen for 20 minutes who I'd done more for in 20 minutes than I'd had somebody who'd had 14 sessions. But that wasn't showing the stats.
If you get a big enough sample group, you can find numbers to support any issue in any argument you want to make.
And that again is that great misconception. I love that you pointed it up too. Like we've been a world. It's not just your nation. I'm Canadian. We're a world that has been at war, and rightly pointed out, for eons, and it doesn't stop. But it's the awareness of when it affects you, that's when you pay attention. And I think it's important that we realize that we are actually all connected. And you'd actually brought up an interesting point, Jake. You had said that there was no point in retelling your story it was, you know, it wasn't about the retelling, it was about the healing. And I think that, again, there's no right or wrong with a statement, and that there's layers to that. I think it, from a therapy standpoint, I think you're 1,000% correct. If you know, that there, if it's not serving you, then there's no point in doing it. But I would argue that there is a point in retelling your story. But it's where you tell that story. Telling it in a therapy session with a 24-year-old woman who has never seen a battle, or even with me, a 43-year-old Canadian who has never seen a battle, may not be the most effective use of that story. But telling it with brothers in arms who are experiencing things and don't know how to get out of where they are right now, and you having found a path, is a reason for telling that story. Because the point, when you said there's no point in retelling, I think there is a point in retelling, and the point is connection. Because through connection, that's how we find our community. And in finding our community, we find both the people who can help us and the people who we can help. And I think that is the point in telling the stories, having an effective dialogue so that we can start to find the commonalities. Like, we've already found commonalities even within this group of just saying some of the things that we've said, and some of the things that have been shared. And we haven't even touched the surface of half of our stories, right? We're barely at iceberg level at this point. And so I think it's that whole finding our community, finding our understanding, telling our story from our point of view. I think there is a point there. Telling your story just because a therapist is on the clock for 12 to 14 sessions and needs the stats. You're right. There is no point in that. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up too, and it's something that I've struggled with basically my entire life, particularly being born in a very rural environment, growing up on a ranch and in a farming community, but being in the arts around those type of people, has been very interesting for me, because I have always been referred to or noted as being effeminate, which I think is hilarious, because I'm probably one of the straightest guys I know. But the assumption has always been that while he's in the arts, he's probably gay. Yeah. Again, I've got a lot of gay friends, and I don't care one way or the other. Who you sleep with is who you sleep with.
Tyler, you are so pretty. I mean, come on.
I know. It's a very, very moisturized, well-maintained face. But I, you know, and I've always found that frustrating with having to label things, particularly having to label things masculine and feminine. And one of the things that I would postulate is that we're not binary. Like, it is not this A or B, and it's not even A and B. And I think one of the reasons why we were having such a hard time finding the language to describe the energies that we feel when we're doing some of these things is the world is remarkably diverse. And I can tell you that I've experienced energies with dogs, cats, horses, pigs, dolphins, you know, and they're all uniquely different energies. And I would never classify one as feminine or masculine. There is an energy that comes from my cat when she curls up on my lap and settles in for the night to watch TV. There's also an energy that comes from my cat when I haven't fed her. There's an energy that comes from a herd of horses when they are on a full charge. There is also an energy that comes from a horse when you are alone with them in a field and it is just you and them, and you have worked with that horse for years. And there's an understanding, as you'd pointed out, Jake, that is almost to an ESP level, where you don't have to say a thing, the horse doesn't have to say a thing, and you both know what's going on. And that is a communication, and that is an energy, and I wouldn't classify it as a masculine or a feminine. And there's an energy that comes with dolphins. I remember when my wife and I first got pregnant, I was emceeing a wedding in Thailand and was also part of the wedding party. And my wife would have barely been 3 months pregnant at this point. And we went and did the wedding, and it was two of my greatest friends growing up are brother and sister. And so it was the brother's wedding, Jason, that I went to. And then his sister Vanda's birthday was literally the week later. So we just agreed we're going to stay in Thailand and party. We're going to party with Jay. We're going to party with Vanda. And I, having been through the world a few times, knew that I did not want to spend most of my time in Bangkok. And so, and I didn't even want to go down to some of the other more touristy destinations. I knew there's this beautiful island, Koh Samui, and we got this little private villa that we rented for Vanda. And it had its own little private beach. And we'd go and we'd swim in the ocean every day. And the third day that we were out, this pod of dolphins came into the bay. And the three of us were swimming, and they just instantly kind of started to hover around my wife. And I've never seen, and I've worked with dolphins. I used to tour guide in Puerto Vallarta. I worked with a good friend of mine, Juan Carlos, who runs Vallarta Adventures, and they have penned dolphins, and I'd worked a lot with the penned dolphins. I've also been out and scuba diving with wild dolphins before in both Mexico and Australia, but I'd never seen dolphins behave this way. And what they did was they came up and they just kind of hovered around Jen, almost like they were protecting her. And
Aww.
and you know, Jen was able to reach out and like touch them, and they were super calm too. Like normally dolphins tend to be very active, and like, you know, they'll play in your wake, or they'll like swim around, or they'll jump, or they'll like do one of these to you kind of thing. These dolphins got super still. They kind of put their blowholes up, and they were like breathing. You could hear them breathing, and and we were just kind of all floating in the water. And there's no way to classify that as masculine or feminine. What it was a very protective energy. It was a calming energy, but they did not, interestingly enough, they did not want me near my wife. So I was like, I come in and then I get that. And I'm like, whatever you just said, Mrs. or Mr., because I'm not looking to see. Like, what was, right? But again, I've had all of these experiences where I've shared these energies. And again, growing up on stage, having the opportunity to feel what it's like to connect with 200, 300, 400 people. And now that I speak internationally, the connection you get with 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people, it's, I would never classify it masculine or feminine. It is an energy. And I think it's this need to classify, this need for statistics, that is really what hinders and hampers our ability to just communicate. Why do I have to tell you what color I feel or where I feel that anxiety in my body? Right now I'm seeing red because you're asking me a stupid question. Yeah. I don't know that answer, but I can tell you, when a crowd comes and gives me a standing ovation, that I can feel it radiate from here. I know that when I get anxious and nervous and feel stage fright, I also feel it radiate from here. They come from the same area, but they're two entirely different feelings, and yet have the same physiological response. So all of these things, I think, need that communication level, right? And it becomes that understanding. So back to the original point, why do we tell our stories? It's not for the therapy of it, although there can be a very cathartic release in saying something out loud for the first time or for the last time. But it's because when we tell our stories that we can find that community, we can find the people who understand what we're talking about, who, or maybe need to understand what we're talking about, where we say a thing and they go, I want to know more about that. I'm curious. I've experienced, I know what you're talking about at the beginning, but it's this end bit that I don't understand and I want to understand it. You know, and I think it's through that power of communication, that power of storytelling, that we can find the connection, that we can regain that humanity. The world has been in conflict for forever. That I think it's because we are trying to find literally and figuratively finding languages to explain ourselves, where I think if we can give ourselves up to a little bit more feeling, a little bit more esoteric in our understanding of the world, as Di had pointed out, some of our greatest scientific minds were actually philosophers, and science itself grew out of a want of an understanding of our world and observing those things. I think one of the things that I heard recently, and I loved it, I thought of it a couple of times when everybody was talking, I've never seen $1 million cash, but I know that it exists. And I don't need to see it to know that it exists. It's a concept that I can understand. Or $1 billion cash. Is it possible to have $1 billion cash stacked up on a table? Yes. And it's probably actually not as big as we all think it is. But I don't need to see it to understand its concept. And I think this visual proof requirement that we've come to need as a society is really again, it's one of those things that I think is dividing us as opposed to bringing us together. And I think one of the interesting things that came out of your talk, Jake, too, is even talking about patriotism, right? A true blue, red-blooded American, and I believe in this cause. And I think patriotism is very similar to organized religion, in that there is a difference between faith, spiritualism, and religion. And then further, organized religion, right? Faith is your belief in the higher power, whatever it is you want to give it up to. Spiritualism is allowing that to enter into yourself and be at one with it. Religion is your faith in your spiritualism and your understanding of the world. And organized religion is a whole bunch of people who come together who say, I believe that as well. And it's that root kernel that is the most important, right? It's your relationship with internally with yourself and externally with your environment. And if you can find people who are of like mind, that's great. I love my country fiercely, but I don't think it's right in everything that it's doing, because it's a collective. How can a collective be 100% right? And I only have 1/10 of the population. We're 36 million versus 360 million up here in Canada. And I even think on a community level, my hometown is probably about 15,000 people. And the city that I live in right now, 1.3 million. We can't get along or agree. I can't even find harmony within my own family. And I only have a wife and a daughter. And my daughter and I argued about whether or not she could take a crayon into the truck this morning. So if I can't find harmony in our understanding there, how are we going to be 100% right within our leadership of our countries and our nations? And I think this need to be right and wrong, this binary decision. Yeah. We talk about masculinity, toxic masculinity, embracing the feminine, and all of these words that are trying to explain just us as human beings going through and experiencing our world. I think that polarization is what the problem is. That it doesn't need to be black or white. It doesn't need to be binary. It doesn't even need to be a yin and yang and have dueling polarity. I don't think polarity needs to be the issue. And so again, why should we be telling our story? Why do we need to express ourselves? So that we can find that understanding, so that we can find that commonality. Anyway, that was my rant.
I didn't even get a chance to introduce you. Retroactively, for those of you listening, Sean Tyler Foley joining us today from Alberta, Canada, is also a coach, consultant, inspirational speaker, hence his standing ovation comments, and also an actor in this, I believe, 2 great companies. So, and he has had his own very interesting experiences with masculinity and mental health. He even did an interview with me about some of his more intense experiences. If you wanted to talk about any piece of that, I will just vaguely leave that out there to allow him to choose what next he would like to jump into as a topic point over the next 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and again, because I love the idea of communication and sharing, how does that resonate with everybody? Where can we take this conversation next in the next half hour?
Well,
yeah.
Can I jump in a bit? Because
absolutely.
I'm fascinated with this idea of language. I love language, and I like specifically social linguistics. And the difference between the problem is we all deal in this analog communication, don't we? So, but we all think that we're listening in digital. So somebody says like patriotism. Well, it's a presumption we automatically know what patriotism is. We don't have a clue what patriotism is. I mean, if I talk about British patriotism, you get lots of racists who say that they are patriotic British people, but they're actually not, in my view, patriotic at all, because they're the very people that we went to war with in the Second World War, because that's the views that they hold, and so they're waving and say, "Oh, I'm patriotic. My father fought," and you go, "Well, no. Your views are the very views that we fought against." So that's the trouble with words. Everybody hears the words to mean something else, and it's not even that simple. It's where you are at that moment in time, you'll actually hear the words. So that's the problem with talking about things. That's the great thing with horses and dogs. If you turn around and you say to them, I'm not angry, I'm not scared of that horse, the horse will just look at you and go, you are scared of me, because it can see it, it can smell it, it knows that you're scared of it, it knows you're angry with it, but language is such a deceptive thing because it has so many elements to it. I don't know if that was useful. I don't know, just random.
Well, and it's nuance and interpretation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake.
No, so we've gone out of our way with the way we've expanded on our own language, specifically speaking, those of us that are here that are English speakers. We have expanded on our language to the extent that we can intentionally obscure our meaning and intentionally make things more vague, harder to decipher the clarity of. We've done it for legal reasons. We've done it for contract reasons. We do it for manipulative reasons. We do it in our politics. We do it in our marketing. We've got incredibly complicated language. This always makes me think of social media, because even with our verbal communication, as in depth as it is, we also still communicate so much through body language and facial expression. I was taking some classes in sign language, and I was surprised at just how much of sign language is delivered through facial expressions, not just with the hand motions. A lot of the intent behind it is all given through the facial expressions. And one of the dominant forms of communication we have is what we're looking at right now. It's digital. So we communicate by text message, we communicate by email, we communicate by words on social media, and we've lost all of the nuances other than the words themselves. And the number of shit fights that have started for things that are statements that have been misconstrued, or people that have tried to express themselves and not been linguistically fluid enough to get their point across without coming across abrasive or coming across the wrong way. How much could we have been able to avoid had we emphasized more internal conversations in our societies rather than just what words we're putting on a screen in front of each other?
Yeah. Well, and isn't that the truth too? Because as you pointed out, sign language really requires that what not only what the sign means, but what the intent behind the eyes and the expressions are. And the digital world now, where it's all communication through screen and just the written text. There's no nuance to it. I remember I've heard so many different people say, I wish there was a sarcasm font.
Thank you.
And because sarcasm is one of those, it's the base form of humor. I would beg to differ. I like my sarcasm, but they, as somebody who uses it fairly regularly, I'm very sarcastic in my communication. I love the lightness of it. I also really enjoy the juxtaposition. But if I was to type the things that I'm sarcastically saying out loud, I would just be crucified for the words I was saying, because there's no context to it. And I think, on a global scale, not only within our own, English vernacular, or is there this ability to have misunderstanding or choice of word form and where we're going with the words that we use, but then you have added complexities where there are, even within English speaking nations, differences in meanings of words and what they mean. I mean, I still have the Queen on my money, but there are words that are used across the pond that do not mean the same thing over here. And and then you get down under, or South Africa, and all of them speaking theoretically the same language and speaking them differently, even cross border. We are not that far apart, Canada to the United States, and yet I have no idea what a beanie is any more than what a toque is, and yet they are the exact same thing.
I've talked to Australians before that for the life of me I could not understand, and they were speaking English. I was just like,
So they claim.
Yeah.
You can cross county lines in North Carolina and go through this.
Oh,
we have that in Britain. You go from one part of the country to the other, totally different languages.
Oh yeah.
Sayings.
New York to Louisiana. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And yet we recognize this, and yet we're still like, well, I said this thing. Okay, well, yeah, you said it, but did I hear it? For one, did I understand it? And I hate, as a corporate facilitator, by the way, and I do that as a gig. I hate two-way and three-way communication. I have given a message. You have heard a message. Have you been able to retransmit that message back to me so that I know that you understood that message?
Duplication. What?
Yeah, I know. But the theory is true. I'm going to use words. And again, we're going to have trigger words. Patriotism being one of those ones right now. Like, what does it mean to who, to where, to when? And it depends entirely regionally where you say that word, who you say that word to. And, I hate the Canadian flag right now. Absolutely hate it. I have a violent reaction to seeing it. My wife and I both do, because we had a huge protest that started in my hometown of, people, patriotism and take back the country. And I didn't know that the country had been taken away. So I didn't know that we needed to retrieve the country. And, they were set up and in my opinion, being very disruptive, but they had their belief, and they had absolutely every reason to have their belief. But then they took a symbol of a nation and literally took it back. Now every time I see a maple leaf, I go, oh, fucking yahoos. Oh my God. Right. I can't. And it because of the meaning that it has taken on to me. That's a symbol. It's just a symbol. So imagine words and the complexities of it, because there's so much that goes into how this one piece of cloth has now created a reaction inside me to make me go, eh. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about words and other forms of communication, it's so hard for us to do. And I think that's one of the great things about working with animals, is you have both pointed out, they don't talk back. And sometimes you need to not talk. You need to listen.
There's no deception.
Feel. Yeah. And this isn't the only thing that you can listen with. And that's, again, why I love heart math, Jake. I absolutely love heart math, because there's a lot of processing that happens in between this part that filters out what needs to be heard here. And I love the heart math study for showing when we are in alignment and when we are out of alignment, and what those two scientifically look like from a biorhythm standpoint, and what it looks like when we're in alignment, when we're out of alignment, and being able to say this is scientifically how I know. I don't know. I love that we needed science to prove that. Yep, I'm in alignment.
Yep.
Yes, you are, according to this graph. Yeah, I could have told you that.
Yep. Not only that, but with it's so cool that not only can we learn how to bring ourselves back there as well too, and it's a shame that for some people it's taken a tool to be able to show them how to bring themselves back there again. It's taken a digital tool to be able to bring attention back to the fact that this is a problem.
Well, not only that, but a principle that has been known we want to talk language, Eastern and Western medicine.
Yeah.
Eastern medicine has known this for eons, like a written record of at least 6,000 years of knowing when your heart and your head are in alignment, and even have graphic illustrations of what those two look like that are not very dissimilar to what the scientific graphs look like now. So I think, again, I feel that we are on this precipice of relearning lost knowledge. And whether that's Toltec knowledge or Stoic mysticism or ancient Egyptian, it doesn't matter where we're coming from. I think that, again, I've never seen $1 million cash, but I don't need to know that it exists. I don't have any basis for my faith in this theory other than I feel it to be true. We are pushing towards a point where, because I think the world is tired. I think if everybody could give like one adjective for how they feel over the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I think we're just tired. Like, I'm exhausted. I don't know why. It's because I'm feeling the energy of an entire planet, almost 8 billion people. We're all exhausted. Why? Because I think we've lost touch with what makes us human and grounds us. And that's our connection to nature, our connection to each other, our connection to selves. And that's why I think, again, what's the point of telling your story, Jake? Not for therapy. Don't tell your therapist. But there is a huge power in telling your story from a connection standpoint, from finding a community and finding a larger community within that, finding those people
I agree with that.
who need
I
to
agree
hear
with
it.
that 100%.
Yeah.
There's this emphasis that the system wants to make us all believe that it's individuals have got a problem. Now, in the Western world, we have so many people who are ill. So how is it the individuals are the ones that have got the problem? Surely it's the system that needs to change, not the other way around, because it's making it.
Oh gosh, I forgot who the quote is from, but I love the statement. It is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
And we're all waking up to that. We know the planet is dying because we're basically raping the whole planet. So the system we've got is just not working. It's just crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, it's a great feedback loop.
Yeah, but as we come together also as individuals and supporting one another to heal and to become more self-aware, that is also important. Like our responsibilities as individuals to be role models and to just start as one person, because as one person, we can make a difference. And it might take a little bit for that ripple to go out into the world and become larger to take over the system. But I think it's important to acknowledge both sides of that.
Yeah, but ripples start from a small ripple, don't they? So there's this emphasis, we all need to do these massive things. We don't need to do a massive things, because if we have one little ripple, that can change the world. We've been told that these so-called experts know better than everybody else, and they don't.
Well, and if you will indulge me, seeing as I got 20 minutes left, and I'm going to take up 10 minutes of it, and I'm going to tell you a story about ripples. because again, I have had the extreme joy and privilege of getting to speak internationally for many, many, many years. And I've been on some very, very large stages with some of the biggest names in the industry, from Les Brown to Phil Town, Tony Robbins. And the biggest impact I've ever seen, ever, came from a small conference in Invermere, BC, Canada, attended by, I think, 50 to 60 people, by a speaker who nobody knows really outside of a very small group of people. His name's Jared Morrison. And he gave a talk called The 10-Minute Time Machine. And what you need to know about Jared is when he was younger, in his early teens, he had terrible, terrible migraines, horrible headaches. And when he was 15 was the first time he was prescribed opioids to deal with the pain, because, you know, Tylenol just wasn't working. And so if the, you know, T1s and the T2s don't work, well, we have a new number, T3. Try this out, see how it goes. And slowly over time, Jared developed a dependency and an addiction onto those pills. And as he progressed in his life, and as he grew up and entered adulthood, he got married, had children, but his dependency on chemical addictions didn't wane in any way. And so Jared started to spend a lot of his time focused on trying to find his wife. It ended up costing him his marriage, his addictions. So his wife and his children were separated. It cost him his job. He had a very, very high profile job with a very large, well-respected organization, and basically in his mind cost him everything. And so he had made it a very concentrated, deliberate effort to find the right combination of alcohol and pills that would end his life in a way that was accidental enough that his life insurance would still pay out to his children, because he thought that that was the one thing that he could give his kids. And he felt that they would be better off, their lives would be better off if his life wasn't part of it. And the irony is, when he was fired from the one job, he ended up getting a new job as a life insurance salesman. So he knew all of the ins and outs of exactly how to do this and what would trigger a payout and what would stop a payout, what he needed to do. So he was very methodical in what he did. And it's also very scary for him to share this in front of a room full of 60 strangers, given that his vocation is selling life insurance, saying, I spent the better part of a decade trying to end mine this way for this reason. So he did this talk called The 10-Minute Time Machine. And he talks about the mindset that brought him to this, and what he was trying to accomplish, why he was trying to accomplish it, what his methodology was, what his habits were, what his routine was in coming up with this. And his routine would be that he would eat a Rice Krispie square. We'd go to 7-Eleven or a convenience store, and he'd buy a Rice Krispie square and a Slurpee, so an ice drink, an icy, and then he would come home. The Rice Krispie square would be the one thing that his stomach could tolerate, because he was about to pump a whole bunch of chemicals into it. It was the one thing that would allow those chemicals to absorb without him having to puke. The Slurpee or slushy was the quickest delivery method for him to be able to taken large quantities of alcohol while mixing it. It was the right kind of mix because it was super sugary and super sweet, so he could throw in his beverage of choice. And then he knew some very generous pharmacies that didn't ask too many questions, and he would make his circuit to get these different combinations of pills, and then he would write down what he was going to try that day, and then he would take these things down. And there was a family event that he had to go to, so he had to, fake his sobriety long enough that he could function in this event this one day. And he pulled it off very well, very convincingly. And his ex-wife and her new husband needed a break. They'd been full-time caregivers of the kids, and they needed a night to themselves. And Jared appeared to be functioning very well. And so they convinced themselves that it would be okay for him to take the children, who he had lost custody of at this point 2 years previous, for the night. What's the harm? How could it go wrong? So he takes the kids, stays sober, gets them fed, gets them to bed, goes to bed himself. He's like, you can hit pause on this, Jared. Not tonight. We don't need to do anything. We've got the kids. But what happens when we get into habits? Falls asleep, wakes up, cool, missed my deadline. Leaves the house, goes and gets his snack, comes back, starts getting into the routine, does some things, wanders off to the bathroom, looks in the room and sees the kids. Nope, it's got to be a hallucination. These drugs are kicking in quick tonight. Can't be the kids. They wouldn't be here. Why would the kids be here? And then it starts this tizzy. So he's like, no, I'm hallucinating. I've got to get more chemicals into me. So puts more chemicals into his body, but the kids are still there. Very confusing for him. Doesn't know why. Goes to the couch. He's going to let this play out the way that it's going to. More chemicals, more pills. Kids still there. Can't figure it out. And that's the night that he got the combination right. And as he's trying to literally get the kids out of the house chemically, which we know is a physical impossibility, he's now wasted the entire evening doing this pursuit, and it's now 6 o'clock in the morning, and his son gets up hungry, wanting breakfast. And he comes and he says, Dad, are you okay? And in that moment, Jared realizes, no, he is not okay. And things are going south, but he can't articulate because he has so many things inside of his body that are preventing him from actually even moving his mouth. At this point, he's paralyzed on the couch, and things are starting to narrow and things are pinpointing, and he can just barely see his son. And he has this thought.